Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of Big Sound Small Town, the podcast that spotlights the talented and diverse musicians in small towns and communities. This season we're branching out to include the community of people who make it possible for musicians to be able to perform their music, the producers, the recording engineers, the venue owners, and many others. And as always, the small town musicians. Remember, small town doesn't mean small talent. Hear their stories. Today, Big Sound Small Town is coming to you from the Earl Scruggs Center in beautiful Shelby, North Carolina, and my guest is photographer Daniel Coston.
Hey there.
Hey,
how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. Glad to be up here. I've been hearing about this show and glad I finally could get back up here and talk to you today.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come up here and do this.
Always glad to be back in Shelby. This is the city and the Scruggs Center has been great to me.
Yeah, let's start with that. Then.
Yeah.
Tell me about the last exhibit you had here.
I was asked by the Scruggs Center to do an exhibit on musicians in North Carolina. We titled it Carolina Calling, after the name of Arthur Smith's TV show. And I knew Arthur, and obviously he was featured in the show as well. It was really fun to put together a show about the musicians that I have met, photographed, known, been friends with, still friends with. It really was about a lot of the musicians that influenced my work as a photographer.
Okay.
And it was really fun to put that exhibit together and talk about in this venue what those musicians and those photographs meant to me. And I think it meant a lot to other people that came and saw the show as well.
Yeah, it was fabulous. I saw it every day, almost that month. I mean, it was great.
Thank you.
How did you decide who to pick and what pictures to choose?
I tend to say I let the photographs tell me.
Oh,
there are certain things that say, I've always liked this one. As a photographer, when you have, we were discussing Link Ray before we started rolling. I have my favorites of Link Ray, so I always start with those, but then I have to go, wait, there's more. Because as a photographer, you get stuck on your 2-3 favorites.
Right.
And for this show, I actually pulled together one I had not exhibited before, or exhibited in a very long time, and it just felt right for this show. And a lot of it was back and forth between myself and Mary Beth Meredith, who was the curator of the museum, and I said, suggest things to me. If you have favorites like Acoustic Syndicate, make me pull those out. Make me pull some things out of the archives that I haven't thought about in 15, 20 years. And it really was a dialogue, and we kind of built the show from there.
How long did it take you to put the show together?
Yeah, it was about 2 or 3 months, back and forth. I tend to, I go into burrow mode where they'll say, okay, send us blank, and I tend to work on it pretty quickly, because with my schedule as an event photographer or traveling, working with the musicians, if I let it sit, it sort of gets lost in the backlog. So as soon as they said, give us blank, I really tried to put the show together and put it in a way that I felt really good about it. And also, I was vested in it. I was really believed in the show, and it was fun for me to dive down that rabbit hole and say, okay, what's here? What works? Okay, let's talk about the show. Let's talk about the musicians or certain experiences. And I really had a lot of fun. So anytime they said, we need a bit more of this, it was like, great. Let's talk about that.
Okay, well, let's kind of talk through an exhibit for these people. Okay,
sure.
You're choosing the pictures. I mean, you got some ideas. You're choosing pictures. Once you choose these photographs, what happens then?
Some of it, it was all putting together JPEGs that I felt like represented the show pretty well. And we got down to, I think you saw 38 photos on the wall. I printed 40. Okay. There were a couple extra pictures that did not make the show and may make a show if this travels elsewhere. And eventually it was back and forth and say, okay, we've got these. And I always leave one or two as a wild card, or something changes, or, oh, let's add this person, or, oh, wait, I just found this picture of George Clinton that from 1998, which did happen. We had settled on another one. I had taken him elsewhere. And this show where I had photographed him in Charlotte in April 1998 finally turned up in my archives, and I'd just been in a different box. And it was like, oh, wait, here's a better one. Okay, so let's go with that. And then once we had those photos set, then Meredith said, okay, write about these people.
I was getting ready to ask you if that was the part. Did you write about the stuff that was written on there?
I wrote all that.
Okay, you wrote all that.
Yeah.
Okay, see, I didn't know if that was, if people need to know that. I didn't know if that comes from a curator or if it comes from you.
Many times, anytime you're working with a place like the Scruggs Center, sometimes the curator will say, okay, if you're not comfortable writing this, I will write this. I really am a writer first. I always say I tend to write through the camera. And that allows me to verbalize sometimes what was going on around the photo, before the photo, after the photo. And for this one, they just said, okay, write about it. And
do you take notes of or is this mental pretty much?
Sometimes I need to do more notes again. My wife, Sandra, got me into journaling several years ago, and I've kind of let that lapse the last few years just because I've just been too busy, or I haven't been in a place where I wanted to sit down and write or talk about the different things. But largely, I can look at the photograph and say, okay, this is what was going on. Yeah. It all comes back amazingly well, even now. It's funny, I was just having a conversation with a friend a few days ago. We were discussing an artist, and in the middle of the conversation, I remembered that I had photographed that artist with somebody else 15 years before. I literally had not thought about those photos in 15 years, and all of a sudden it came back to me like I was there, like I was back there. So photographs have a remarkable way of kind of jogging my memory and saying, oh, yeah, this is what was going on around it, even now. Yeah.
Well, I can use this, then it's pretty cool. Okay, one of the pictures was of Brian and Steve McMurray. Yeah. And part of it, you said Bob Dylan was on that.
Yes, okay. I remember that.
It's really cool. So I'd seen him, and I called Steve or text Steve, I can't remember, and I asked him, I told him it was here, the picture was here, and I asked him, did he remember? No. Nothing, you know, and I text Brian knew everything, you know, Brian. Oh yeah, I'll tell you where it was, and I remember, you know, I remember. And I said, it says Bob Dylan was on the next stage. And he said, yeah. And I said the same thing to Steve, and Steve said, I don't remember it. So,
yeah.
I mean, so, you know, it is really cool that you remembered it. One of them did not. But it's, you know, that was interaction from looking at a picture for me that I looked at all of those pictures really hard and studied it because there were people I knew personally also in there. And it is really interesting. And now that I know that you wrote that stuff, it tells me that it is more than just taking a picture to you.
Oh, it is. It's life. For me, photography and everything I've done creatively is me conversing with my life as it happens. The people I've met, interacted with, known, the different experiences as a writer, a videographer. You know, a lot of my work is a videographer, even though I sometimes refer to myself now as a lapsed videographer. That still informs my work and my everyday life. I always say that if you look close enough, my life is there. I'm not in those photographs, but I am. It's my experiences and my experiences with those subjects filtered through the camera.
Right. I mean, it's not like you take the picture, but that's what it is. It's just, I mean, there's more to it right there. Obviously, the love for music is there.
Yes.
I mean, that is, and I'm sure in your other work, it comes through the same way. I mean, you appear to be a passionate guy about what you're doing.
Yes.
Which breathes life into a picture as opposed to it being a picture.
Yeah, I think, and thank you for saying that. I've been very lucky in that I still love what I do. 25 years on, I'm still discovering things, finding things, and I think along the way I've become a better photographer. I can't say that I would, if you gave me the chance to photograph Mr. Cash or the Avett Brothers in those situations again, I wouldn't photograph them the same way that I did in 2003, 2005. Hopefully I would do a better job, but at the same time, the work is there. That's me at those moments, doing the best I can. And that's, if you saw me out this week photographing a gala or luncheon or a couple of concerts, it's the same person. It's just me in different stages. Yeah.
You know, and I guess that is kind of like your life. I mean, this is Daniel at 18, and this is Daniel at, 22. Maybe not the same guy.
Yeah. One of we were discussing, you were going to have me send you photographs of myself. I have a picture of myself with a toy camera when I'm 4 years old.
Yeah, that's great.
Christmas 19. I think it was in the show as well. And that's me.
It was.
To a certain degree, that's still me. It's just me filtered through life 45 years later.
That's pretty cool. All right, I'm going back to the exhibit. You're putting it together.
Yes.
You decided on the stuff. Now, okay, how do you get them in a form that the people see? I mean, we moved past actually a photograph that most people sees to a piece of artwork, basically, is what you've done there. Now, or do you do that? Or do you have to collaborate, or do you have a printer that you use, or do you do that?
I worked with a printer in Charlotte to do one that was relatively a good price, but had the look I wanted.
Okay.
I used to drive every Eckerd's and Photomat in Charlotte crazy because I wasn't pushy, but I knew what I wanted, and I tend to go back to the places that would give me what I wanted.
Right.
But really, the easiest thing to do is get the JPEG. Since we're now in a digital medium, which is funny because I only went digital 10 years ago. I went kicking and screaming into digital.
Oh, I know, I understand.
Yeah.
Part of what many young photographers did not have the darkroom experience,
which I miss. And actually that still is good for me as now working in the digital medium, because one, I want to get it through the camera. I always say get it through the camera right the first time, and then everything else is a bonus. But I still will get the JPEGs ready. Okay, this is exactly what I want, and it's like, okay, print this. Don't overthink this.
Right.
It's pretty much I always say I like machinery that doesn't think too much. I still want to think more than the machinery.
Right.
Okay, here's what I want. Just print it. It's good to go.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. So I wondered how difficult that was to get a printer to have your vision of a completed project.
It's not that hard, but you've got to find the places that don't overthink it and are also affordable. I'm a working, jobbing photographer. You can send stuff elsewhere and you can spend way more money than you probably should. You've just got to find, like anybody, when you collaborate in the creative process, you've got to find somebody who says, okay, I'm going to handle this, and they don't overstep what they say they're going to handle. So there's a couple places in town that I work with, in Charlotte, that I work with when I'm necessary, depending on the project and what they're looking for. If a certain look, certain tone, okay, let's go with this place. Okay, you're looking for this, let's go with that. But I also keep tabs on who's doing what elsewhere. I've gone, if I could find more local camera shops that did a job that I thought was worth the price, I'd go there.
I wondered if that would, and I wondered how difficult those were to find, actually.
There's not many camera shops left. I actually would like to find more camera shops elsewhere. I know I could do everything online, but I really like the brick and mortar aspect. I like working with an individual or a small company saying, here's what I want. Right. And that's how I was for years. I mean, even when I was processing photos at Eckerd's for years, which I did, I knew the guy who worked the photomat. And I knew the guy that worked the lab. And I'd say, here it is. Okay, I need this. Oh, wait, I don't need anything with this. Just process it. Right. Okay, I need some prints. Just don't.
It was probably less a problem then than it is in the digital age, when everybody can add anything in the world. I mean, there's a lot more that this is one of the things that's really changed about photography in terms of film and digital. Right. Film, you did the thinking ahead of time. You thought about, okay, do I want this color or black and white? Okay, let's shoot it in black and white. I'll load some film. I preferred Ilford black and white because it has a more silvery look that's more
more like, to me, certain tones of Kodak used to be in the earlier part of the 20th century. I'm from upstate New York originally, moved down here when I was 10, almost 11, and my grandmother lived in Rochester. So, I was very much influenced by the early 20th century photography look that came out. It was largely influenced by Kodak, exactly in both color and black and white. So you're shooting, okay, let's do a shoot on black and white film. Okay, I want it to have a certain look, so I'll shoot it at this speed. Okay, let's do it at this exposure. With digital, you can just say, okay, here we go. And you can figure it out as you go. Well, that's the one thing is sometimes you would do a film shoot and you wouldn't get the best shot until shot 20, shot 32, 34. It's like, so many times it was like, oh my God, this is finally working, but we're on shot 36. And now digitally you shoot, but you do all the work on the editing side, which has its own problems in that you can literally lose yourself in a darkroom. I've seen way too many photographers just burn, shoot, and just kind of make it up in the darkroom or on their computer later on, whereas to me, Photoshop should be a bonus. The darkroom, in the darkroom you can make a really good photo, great, but the photo still has to be there.
Oh, it does.
Yeah,
it does.
And I pretty much in the show that you saw, there really was no messing in any of the photographs. That was me. And some of even the earlier black and white prints were taken from early prints that I did 15, 20 years ago in the darkroom myself, because that's it. That's the look I want.
Right.
Okay, now let's get a JPEG of that matches what the print looked like as best we can.
Yeah, that's good. I'd say there is both pluses and minuses, I guess.
There are. And really, a lot of it's down to time. It's like,
it does. It is down to time. I agree. Darkroom time is time consuming.
I used to have a darkroom in the back end of my house, and I used to spend a lot of time, like Sunday night, 9, 10 o'clock. That's where I did a lot of my printing. But that was just a couple hours, and now you can spend days on a computer catching up, especially if you're someone like me and you've got 3-5 events you're shooting a day. You can lose yourself in that computer. I always say I like out of town gigs because it means I get away from my computer for a while. But you still have to get the photograph, and I really still try to get the camera, get the picture right the first time, and then everything else is like, okay, that looks good. Okay, let's tweak that. Done.
Are you using the same equipment today that you started with?
Yes. Actually, we were discussing David Childers. Yeah. I photographed David's new record, Interstate Lullaby, which is a great record.
It is. I think that's one of his best.
It really is.
Best.
Yeah. And David, how I got involved with that record was I ran into David at a show, and he said, I'm recording at Dolph's. Come by this Friday. And I think it was one of the sessions with the full band. Mm-hmm. And I got there and was taking pictures, and Dolph said, well, would you be interested in tagging along? I said, oh, of course. And I said, by the way, if you're recording those 2 microphones straight to a 1/4-inch Studer reel-to-reel tape machine, I should shoot this on film. And so all the pictures, all the black and white, including the cover photo that you see, were taken by the first black and white film camera I ever had, nicknamed George. George is nicknamed for my mom's father.
And what is this camera?
It's a Canon 8E1. Okay. And my dad bought it used in Geneva, New York in 1981. And I commandeered it 15 years later when I started taking pictures. And it's always, even when I went digital 10 years ago, it never has left me. Right. I'll break it out. And there's certain projects that I say, okay, this should be shot on film.
And that was one, since it was with the 2 mics. And
yes. Yeah. It just said, you should shoot this on film. I was still shooting some work on digital, and we did some videos as well. I did that with a different camera I have for different video projects, just a small camera that is portable, allows me to get the look and sound I want. But that one said, you should shoot this on film.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't know if a lot of people can, but I do understand that.
It's a certain aesthetic. It's a certain feel and vibe. And again, when you're shooting that 36 exposure roll of film, you got to think about what you're getting, what's the lighting, how's this going to feel, and I think it reflects. I think it looks better. I'm really excited about the record is going to be released on vinyl in the spring, and I can't wait for that.
Yeah,
there's still a thrill for me as a photographer seeing your work on a vinyl record. It's it's real. I mean, CDs are great. It's like or digital. That's cool, but like a vinyl album, like there's your work on a vinyl record. It's like now it's real. Now that's what got me into photography in the first, photography and music in the first place. When as a kid, I'd look at Beatles records, look at Neil Young records and Simon and Garfunkel, and go, "Oh, that looks like a good gig. How do you take those pictures?" So
liner notes. One of the biggest first thrills for me was seeing my name in liner notes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was huge.
Same.
To me,
Which
you don't see these days. I mean, you lose that in the new market age.
Or they just don't exist at all. People just download the files and that's it. It's supposed to know it's. For me, a record was a whole other world. It's like, oh, what's going on here?
Yeah.
And you would pour through all of Will the Circle Being Broken, and all the pictures and all the scribblings and all the notes on the recording.
With all of the little pictures.
Exile on Main Street was, those were largely photos taken by Robert Frank, very much in line with the Americans project that he had done, and independent, all these little pictures of the Stones that he'd taken on film. I think a lot of it came from a documentary that he did that has only been it's floating out there unofficially, but it's like in the context of that record, it's like, wow, look at that, and then you pair that with the record, and it's like, oh wow, okay,
you actually know who plays. These days, people are clueless.
Mm-hmm, largely, which is unfortunate.
It is. It really is. I mean, but that piece of art ties it all together to music in a way that doesn't exist these days.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I think it can still exist out there, but you have to find the artists that allow it to do so. I think it is kind of it gets lost more in the overall wash of information that's out there and how people hear music and listen to music. But it's still out there, but you've got to find people who are willing to let that conversation continue.
True,
yeah.
All right, I'm back with Daniel, and we're going to find out just where his interest in photography started.
That's a good question. I think, as I was mentioning to you, I have been wanting to create something since I was, really my whole life. I remember seeing Star Wars on my 5th birthday and going, wow, that's awesome. How do you do things like that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then it was, I always knew, I've been writing ever since I could. I largely had taught myself to read and write just by the time I got to school, just because I wanted to. And I was wanting to create something different, something bigger than who I thought I was, and where I was at the time. And I grew up wanting to be a filmmaker. I had written and directed my own TV shows through high school and college, started doing work in the video field, and it was good, but it didn't feel right. I had toyed with photography here and there, but I didn't take it seriously because I wanted to be a filmmaker. And around 1995, I took a job as a sports writer with the Matthews Record in Matthews, North Carolina. It was $30 a week, so it was gas money, and for at least one article every week. But they didn't have a photographer. I grabbed my dad's camera, started taking the pictures. Around that same time, I started working with a magazine in Charlotte called Tangents Magazine, which was a free-form, independent zine. We were, I always say we were everything all at the same time, and it was a collective, so we were all throwing things in together. I came to them as a cartoonist, which is what I also had done through high school, and then immediately started doing feature writing because they did not have a features writer. And then I started covering music through the music that was coming through Charlotte, and then coming, the local bands and then the regional national bands. our photographer at the time, was not covering what I wanted to cover. I was getting into indie rock. I was getting into 60s garage rock. I was getting into Americana, which was really starting to blow up in Charlotte and Raleigh and Chapel Hill. And it's like, well, I've done everything else. I'll just take the pictures of this. And literally the first 5 bands I photographed all hired me. Or it was like, because there were so few people taking pictures of bands at that point. In Charlotte, there was Chris Radock, who was photographing for Creative Loafing. And maybe there was somebody who would take pictures for the Charlotte Post, or maybe somebody with the Observer would photograph a concert here and there. That was it. They weren't photographing local bands. So by default, I found myself, hey, can we hire you to take our promo shoot? We just signed a record label. Can you come up and photograph our album? So I did that with bands like Lou Ford and Mercury Dime and a whole host of, and then... Charlotte area. And then around late 96, I got the chance to photograph Farm Aid. It was in South Carolina that year. Hootie and the Blowfish were the kind of the big name, but it was Willie and Neil and John Mellencamp and all these people, and the Beach Boys. I should backtrack and say the first show I ever saw in my life was a Beach Boys concert.
Really?
Yeah, New York State Fair in 1983. My dad was moving all of us my family down to Charlotte. He'd taken a job down there, and he took us to the State Fair. It's kind of a going away show, and 33 years later, I ended up working with the Beach Boys. So, yeah, and here's the Beach Boys in 1996. I met Carl Wilson, I met Doug Somm that day, and Willie, and all these people, and it was just, I remember at the end of the day going, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I should be doing more of this. Yeah. I always say photography chose me. If you're lucky, things in life choose you, and photography said, you didn't plan on this, you're doing this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I do. Music did that to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was not my plan. But sometimes it just happens that way. So.
And you have to be open to that. I've seen so many people in life would say, well, I didn't plan for that. Well, you don't plan, hopefully you don't plan for meeting the person who changes your life, or you marry, or you don't plan on, in my case, my mom's parents being probably two of the most influential people in my life just because of who they were and who they were to me. Didn't plan on that. Yeah. But it said, this is happening. And I think it's one of the things that still drives me in life, and say, okay, this is happening, let's go.
In college, what did you study, filmmaking?
That's video. I went to York Tech for a year. I think I had this notion I could go to film school after that, and I was burned out on school, and there just wasn't the right time and place. I had been working with a group of people in high school that I really felt like I was going to work with for a long time, and that all splintered once we all got out of high school. It's kind of like a band breaking up. It's like, oh, well, didn't plan on the band breaking up, but okay, now what? And so I kind of got into the working world as a videographer.
It's funny how your life works out. It really is. Because a lot of times, I think there is no plan. Or even if there is a plan, sometimes a better one just materializes from living life.
Well, permanence is a state of mind. It's you can say, okay, I'm thinking about doing this, but you have to stay open to the possibilities of other things coming along. And thankfully, I didn't fight them. I didn't fight. Well, I didn't plan on this, so I won't do it. Well. If everything in your heart, in your head is saying yes, then why say no?
I agree. I totally agree with that. So, all right, that first Farm Aid, I guess that really puts you in the, okay, this is what I really need to be doing.
And it was a surprise to a lot of people, even to myself and to the people I was working with, because I remember Tangents, those folks saying, well, you're a features writer. I was like, well, a year ago I was a cartoonist. So I just said, I'm doing this. Right. And along that same time, the scene in Chapel Hill and Raleigh was really starting to take off. A lot of bands were getting, breaking nationwide. Whiskey Town, who I did work with, Backsliders, and Superchunk, Archer's Loaf. It was a lot of... And I had access to these folks because I would go out and see them, and they'd say, hey, you came from Charlotte to see us? Well, can we look at your pictures? Can we buy them? And pretty quickly, I hit the road. Yeah, and and it really was dovetailing with me going, wow, there's so much music in North Carolina. There's so much regionally, there's so much nationally. I want to go out and see it. I want to do it all. I've always had a love of the work of John Cohen, Walker Evans, all these people who just went out, Dorothea Lange, and all these people who, and then we were discussing rock and roll photographers like Jim Marshall, Henry Diltz, everybody who ever worked with the Beatles, Michael Cooper. It's like, okay, there's something here. And I want to see if I can get to that place, or can I do something that feels like that, but maybe better, something that means that's something extra to me.
It's not only is it creating history, it's creative history.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a twofold deal.
Yeah, and it's changing my life as much as they're changing mine.
And musicians need pictures. I mean, you can say what you want.
Mm-hmm.
They like pictures of themselves, so they do, and it makes them. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It brings to life what they're doing, that they and people who see them can see it, as opposed to recorded music. I mean, the visual part of it is strong.
Some musicians do want to see it, but some have a more, I don't want to say it's not adversarial, but they're more going, it's there, but I don't want to think about it too much. But that's like a lot of things in life. It's like any corporation that hires you to do their photos of their conference, and then okay, we've got them, and they'll never look at them, or they won't look at them again until somebody says, "Oh, can I look at blank?"
Right.
But
some musicians are that way.
Mm-hmm. But I know at the same time, I want to document this. Right. I want to see these things happen. And later on, I've had a lot of musicians, and I meant to say changing their lives as much as they're changing mine. I've had so many musicians thankfully come back to me and say, "I'm so glad you got that. I'm so glad you were there, even though I know I was a total butt to you that day." I've had varying relationships. I've actually had largely good relationships with everybody I've ever worked with.
But I do understand it. Musicians, I mean, they're like anyone else. You have bad days. I played with a lot of people who I couldn't wait to and find out, maybe not so great.
Or you meet them a second time, what was that?
What was that? Yeah, I agree.
I'll give you a good example. One of the records that I shot early on that actually was released nationally was a musician named Andrew Bird, who's still out, amazing musician. I had met him through the Squirrel Nut Zippers, who I knew and had photographed. Another one. Yeah. And he came to Charlotte and did a show in January of 1999. I went and shot one roll of black and white, one roll of color, and Andrew was not having a good day. And I remember in the middle of the show, he started talking. I said, "You ever know? You're on the road. You have one of those days." At that exact moment, the alarm on his van that was parked out in front of the venue went off, and the doors were open. So the doors, the sound of his car alarm goes through the entire theater, and he's at the other end. So it's just like it sounds just booming, and he didn't even crack a smile. It was just like. And I sent the photos to Rykodisc, which was his label at the time. And the label loved them. And he was like, that was the worst show of the tour. And they said, no, this is like Vanity Fair. This is, you'll want this, you like this. And those became the photos for his next record. Nice. And promotional shots. So suddenly I'm in a Rykodisc album. So pretty cool.
On his bad night.
Yes, exactly.
So, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, he should even see the humor in that.
I think he would see that now, but again, it's that is the one great thing about photographs is the photograph may not change, but your perspective as the viewer does. You look at one of my pictures of Mr. Cash, and they were obviously very powerful to me when I took them. Viewing them 17 years later brings a whole host of other emotions. And it's like that with a number of artists that I've worked with. So, but that's life, changing your look at everything, and then changing how you or I look at the photographs.
True. I mean, I think as you age, the experience you had sometimes seems just totally different than it was at the time.
Very, very. I'm amazed looking back at some of the things I did as a photographer, and driving all night to photograph a show and then driving home, or
People don't know that. People don't see that.
No.
I mean, they see the picture. They may be impressed, but no one knows that what went into that. I mean, okay, sure, you made it, and a lot of times you developed it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't see the drive to do it, the time spent to go do it,
Mm-hmm.
the drives back. But it's more involved than what anyone ever sees.
Mm-hmm.
Same with being in the band.
Yeah. Oh, you driving all night to get to the next gig, and then be ready. And I largely don't like sharing the day-to-day details with people. I'd rather just have you look at the work, and it's only in retrospect. On my Facebook page, I tend to list all the events I shot day to day, but I only do that after the fact.
Right.
If you saw me that night, hopefully you wouldn't notice that that was my 6th event that day. I'd sprained my ankle on the 3rd event. But hopefully you just said, "Hey, Daniel, how are you?"
Yeah.
And I took your picture, and hopefully it was a good picture. Then later on you go, "Oh gosh, I had no idea that was what was going on with you that day."
That's pretty cool.
But I sometimes it's good not to give people too much information and just let the photographs speak for themselves.
For what you do, I think it is.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah.
Now, that's so did you get a sense that you could actually at some point, hey, not only am I doing this and it's fun, but I'm actually becoming successful at it? I mean, was there a point that you thought, this is not really a hobby that I'm making money at, but I'm pretty dadgum good at it, and it's working totally?
It was a few people. We were discussing Link Ray.
Yeah.
Link came to Charlotte in January of '98 and did a show at the Double Door, and I took a lot of photos, and then for whatever reason he came back 4 months later and played the Double Door again, and I showed him these photographs, and he's like, "You're really good. So you're a really great photographer. You should do more of this." And I was still considering myself a learning photographer at that point. I was like, oh, okay, if Link Ray's saying this, there's something here. I knew I was capable. I knew I was working with bigger names, but success sometimes is fleeting in terms of how to describe it. For me, success was just being able to pay the bills, and it was great when I could, or the times where work was leaner because of this and that. It was like I might be working with these great names, but it was like I was still struggling to pay the bills, and it's like, it's like your view gets a little skewed in that respect. I think it's more in retrospect that I can look back and say, okay, I've done some good things.
Well, I wondered at some point that you have to take on non-music photography jobs to keep yourself afloat.
I always was, and one of the things that was happening as I started doing more work as a photographer was I started doing more work as a videographer.
Okay.
So literally I was, working out, did a lot of work back then with the city government channel. You go off and do a video of a council member somewhere in the north end of town. Then I drive to Chapel Hill and photograph a band, come back, do it all again, 9 o'clock the next morning. And over time, the video work went away, and then it was like, okay, how do I make a living as a still photographer? And Charlotte was difficult to break into, somewhat because I didn't know these people growing up. And all the years I was working with Mr. Cash and Les Paul, I was on the road, so a lot of them didn't see me week in, week out.
Oh, yes. So you, even though you were doing something as a photographer pretty spectacular, no one really realized what was going on, say, in Charlotte. And
this was in the pre-Facebook, MySpace era. Unless I ran into you on the street and you'd say, "What have you been doing lately?" Nobody would know.
Right. True.
And maybe I posted about it on my website. People don't follow that the way they follow those things on social media now. I was just going out and doing it, and for many years I didn't feel successful because I was paying the bills week to week, month to month. Yeah, struggling like we all are. Just taking care of things, the things we want to take care of. It's really only in the last several years, as I've been very busy as an event photographer and also still going out working all these bands, I go, okay, the bills are paid for this week. No matter what, the bills are taken care of. I am still doing what I want to do. Okay, maybe I am. define success. If that's successful, okay, then maybe I have.
Sure.
Maybe I am.
All right, I'll take that because a lot of people, I don't think, are ever aware of success past the paycheck. I mean, I don't know that, I'm making a lot of money, but is it doing what you want to do? Is it,
For me, it's been about doing, do I want to do this? Okay, let's go do that. Money comes and goes. Obviously, it's good to be able to pay the bills and take care of the things you need to take care of day in, day out, weekend, month in, month, year in, year out. But really, it's about, okay, this is calling to me. I want to do this. Let's go do this. Yeah. And that's still what drives me all these years later.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's good that it still does.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the road or the stuff that comes with it happen to beat you down. Sometimes it does.
It can. And that happens when you're not successful, and it happens when you're really successful.
True. Well, it comes overwhelming then. I do understand that too.
I have seen some great photographers get really amazing gigs in the first year of their photography, and then they hit a lull, which we all do in life. Nobody can run 200 miles forever. True. And something happens and they've quit. And in retrospect, it's like, why did you do that? But it's like they got used to a certain buzz, a certain kind of, oh, it's like this. Well, if it's not like this anymore that I want to do, as opposed to, no, it's just not, it's like this for now, but it can potentially be that again, if not greater. First few, about 2000, 2003, 2004, I was running pretty nonstop, taking pictures of bands, doing video work on the road. 2004, 2005, I started slowing down. I started working more with local bands like the Avett Brothers. I started meeting folks like Carolina Chocolate Drops, started going out and taking pictures of them. I just wasn't on the road all the time because, quite frankly, I couldn't afford it. And about 2010, and I figured, well, that was nice. That was a good run. I'll keep doing this because I want to do this, but maybe it won't be like it was before. And then in 2011, for whatever reason, it had been building without my noticing it. And suddenly in 2011, everybody in Charlotte said, oh, we can hire you for events. This would be great. And then about the same time, I started going out and work. I went to New York, worked the Left Bank, which was one of my favorite bands. Suddenly I'm traveling again, I'm out doing things again, and suddenly I'm shooting 5-6 events again like I was. I was busy, if not busier than I was before, but all these years later, I think because I was older, because I'd done more, I go, okay, I think I'm ready for this now.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I appreciate this now way more than I did 15, 20 years ago when I was just, running from job to job. Now,
during those days, did you have to come up with credentials every once in a while to
yes.
get you in places?
Yes. I still don't have any official credentials.
Well, that's where I was
yes.
going. I mean, okay.
Yes. I'm still bluffing it to a large degree.
I mean, access
isn't important.
It's very important.
In Charlotte, thankfully I'm known well enough now, or people go, oh, it's Daniel. Yeah. But to get in our photograph shows, you have to have media outlets. So for years I would do things for the Charlotte Observer, but on the road with bands, literally any media outlet that said, yeah, use our name, go ahead. So there was a paper in Asheville, weekly, that I used for years. And it was just like anybody, or zines in Charlotte. It was like anybody that said, yeah, go ahead and use our name to get into the show. I did that.
I wondered how that would be because, at some point I wondered that now all you have to do is drop your name and you're in.
Some venues, but if you go to like Blockbuster, PNC Pavilion, or some of the bigger places, you still have to have it all cleared a week or two in advance. The bigger shows, yeah, I think about all the shows early on, and I would just buy a ticket, bring my camera in, and take pictures. I'd find a place in the crowd to take pictures from, and that was all I really needed, all I wanted, really. Yeah. But now, more and more, the bigger venues have to have it all cleared, and this and that. So it's a little difficult. So it's a variety of venues, but a lot of times in Charlotte or even other places, I always knew I wanted to work more with the artists, with the bands. So a lot of times, say if I'm going to work with the Monkees or the Beach Boys, it's directly through the band, or in the Beach Boys' case, I've done a lot of work through their official fan publication, which is Endless Summer Quarterly, and great place, people to work with. And I've worked with them now 20 plus years.
Really?
Yes. And so you have to set that up in advance largely, but a lot of times it's like, hey, can I come and photograph you on Saturday? Yeah, come on.
Oh yeah, that's good. I mean,
yeah.
And I guess a lot of times the bands themselves get you in the venue
yes.
to do that. I mean,
yeah.
Which would make sense. I mean,
yeah.
David's would you probably have all access there?
Not so much for the all access. Only is still reserved for Cracker Farm, who's been there the last 15 years.
I can understand that.
Yeah, they're very protective of him. And even though they've known me now 20 years, and it's like, and be honest, I would love to go back and say hey to them, but if they're more comfortable with him in that backstage domain, fine. There's a lot more that he's not getting that I'm going to get.
Yeah, this is true.
And it, call it, truculence, or to
back with Daniel again, and okay, now, how long have you known David Childers?
David, I met, I'm going to say 96. I actually have pictures of him at the Double Door in 1996, 97. And, David is amazing. David, I will put in the same canon as Mr. Cash, in that he has an equal understanding and fascination of the light and the dark. And I think it's all there in the songs. And when David is behind it 100%, it is a powerful force.
It is.
Yeah,
it is. And I guess that's a part you see in these people you photograph too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can see that, and I can actually, seeing the two, I can see that how true that is.
Mm-hmm.
So that is just that is powerful.
It is, and when somebody's able to express it and then put that out in front of an audience. And the band that David has right now is powerful.
It is.
I just photographed them about a month ago at a benefit for Bob Crawford's Press On Fund, and he had, David will go out with David Niblock, who he got in touch with through one of my books.
Oh, really?
David Niblock, I think he got my North Carolina Musicians book and went, oh, he and David Childers had gone to college together, so they got back in touch, and now they're playing together again, which is amazing. And he recently did a show. Well, he started playing with the rest of David's electric band, which includes fiddle and guitar and bass and drums, and his son Robert on drums. And it was like a punk rock set. And they just literally, people just had their mouths open for 70, 75 minutes. It was just a emotion that he was putting into that. It was just like, well, here it is, just like light it up and burn it.
David is that way. You see him, and he's just he's not what he appears before he steps upon that stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's many David Childers, and I really enjoyed seeing the Davids that have emerged over the last few years. David has come and gone out of music a couple times for various reasons, and he comes back, and it's almost watching a phoenix. It's like he rises and it comes back more powerful, and
differently with a different form too.
Yes, he uses the energy from the people around him, the people in his band, and that includes his son Robert and Jeff on fiddle and Corey on bass and Dale on guitar, and it's like, ooh, wow, this is heavy stuff.
And then I see him with my bandmate Kevin Bridges.
Mm-hmm.
Those two swapping songs.
Yeah.
And it's just or he and Kyle Petty.
Yeah, that's been amazing to watch. That's one of those, on paper you would say, this does not work.
You would.
And then you see them in person and go, wow, this totally works.
So he can.
Yeah.
It's amazing how he can work that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess he's a deep well to photograph too, because.
Oh, he is. He is. And I always try to get him when he's not thinking about me. because that is in the cover photo of Interstate Lullaby is him looking off. I think it's before or after a take, and it was like, I always tell David, don't worry about me. You be you. You do, worry about the recording and everything you're trying to take care of. I'll take care of the rest.
Your favorite person that you photographed? One
of my favorites. Obviously David. I loved my work with Chatham County Line over the years. They always were my possibly the most favorite group of people to photograph because we all had similar senses of humor.
And one of their members is from Shelby, North Carolina.
Yes. Yeah, and they've been shifting. They're now a trio. They have a new record coming out in May, and I still will go out and do some work with them here and there, and I love what they do. Mr. Cash, obviously, because of that was off the charts.
Was that intimidating?
No. But I had to come to terms with what I was doing. In fact, there was a point, and I'll tell you how those gigs happened, was leading up to the photographing the first show with him, which was the tribute show to June Carter. I just looked at myself in the mirror and said, Daniel, you're dreaming this. Don't overthink this. Don't get into how is it that a kid from upstate New York, when he reads about a Johnny Cash in a comic book when he's 9 years old, suddenly is taking pictures for the Carter family, which is what happened. I happened to be at the Carter Fold at the right place at the right time. Something said, go up to the Carter Fold. And the Fold is an amazing place. This is back when it was run by Jeanette and Joe Carter, Sarah and B. Carter's kids. And I picked up that there was something going on the following week with the members of the original Red Clay Ramblers. They were the announced band on June 21st, 2003. John and June had always come and played the Fold around June's birthday, which was late June. She was Valerie June Carter. And they mentioned in passing, there's going to be a tribute show to June, but it was an unspoken thing in the air that just said, there's something else going on. And I got talking to some of the folks that work there, who all turned out to be Carters. They're all related to the Carter family. And one of them just grabbed my arm and said, don't say his name, but come back next week. And she took me around to all Jeanette, and everybody said, this is Daniel. He's going to be taking pictures for us next week. Okay. So here I am photographing, and I still paid at the door every week. I paid $5 every Saturday to photograph that. And he came and played her tribute show on June 21st, was not up to playing June 28th. I was supposed to be in New Jersey the week of July 5th photographing a festival, and the festival fell apart. The week of, I went, okay, well, I'll go back to the Fold, and then went and photographed Mr. Cash's final public appearance, which was July 5th, 2003. I did not interact with him that much because there were so many, his health was precarious, to say the least. You were not aware of how bad his glaucoma was, which he did have. He could see shapes. You were really not aware of that until you were sitting in front of him like I am to you. And even in that state, people wanted to talk to him and sign stuff, and so I said hello to him on the way out. I just left it at that. But to me, how he was dealing with all that, and then wanting to be there for June, to be there for the Carters and the Carter Fold crowd, everybody in that audience had some personal connection to Mr. Cash and June and the family. So it was like, okay, this is happening. Go photograph that. And he was actually supposed to come back and do some more shows in September, late September, and of course he passed away September 12th. It took me 2 days after his passing to realize, oh my gosh, I photographed Mr. Cash's last public appearances, the only ones he did after June passed. And the Carters and the Cashes did not have a lot of pictures of him that last year of his life, because the record company had already had hired somebody to do pictures of Mr. Cash 2002 for American 4, those subsequently used for American 5 and 6. And I think they just weren't thinking about it. They were just trying to take care of his and June's health. Right. So it's been an amazing thing. Like, I stay in touch with John Carter Cash. He's used some of my photos for different Cash projects. And he's told me and told other people that a lot of his favorite pictures of his dad from the last year are mine.
That's great.
how amazing. That's still just mind-boggling to me.
And that came basically on an intuition you had.
Totally. It was just like, again, something in my head said, this is happening. Go. Figure it out as you go. But
that's how you got where you are. You realize that.
Oh, thank you. I guess so.
I mean, it is as with anything, it takes some magic too. You know? And obviously, you carry a pretty good bit of it with you.
Well, thank you. And a lot of it is going out and being willing to make it happen. I think Jim Marshall used, I think he didn't originate it, but Jim would often say, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Well,
but you have to be willing
yes, you do.
to have luck happen, but or put yourself forth. You can have that happen. But at the same time, I've been amazed. I even now in retrospect, I go, yeah, I did that, didn't I? So
yeah, I'm really sure that. And what about the Les Paul deal?
Oh, and that was 2 weeks after the last show of Mr. Cash. That was an amazing summer. It's one of those I look back and go, and it was, that was a year after I did a lot of work in 2002 with the Down from the Mountain tour, which was a good experience, but was unfulfilling. Because suddenly you're working on a major tour with 6 major sponsors and nobody wants to pay for anything because of this profit margin, hence the music business.
Exactly.
And I came out of that tour going, what do I really want to do? I think I need to know more about this music that I love. And that led me to the Carter Family, led me to all these things. But it made me, the following summer, go, okay, let's go. If I want to go do it, let's go do it. So I did photos with the White Stripes when they came to Charlotte.
Yeah, that's too cool.
The fall, I photographed Arthur Lee in Love on the Forever Changes tour, which is still one of the best shows I've ever seen in my life. That same summer, so the last show with Mr. Cash was July 5th, 2003. Les Paul came to Nashville 2 weeks later to be part of the NAMM conference, back when NAMM was in Nashville, and I found out he was doing the Gibson Night of Guitars at the Ryman. Oh yeah, I gotta go see that. So I couldn't even tell you who I got the pass through. That some of that's been lost to time. They just, okay, we'll have your name at the door.
That's great.
And I remember this is way before that part of Nashville got super, I love going that there's so much to do in downtown Nashville. But I remember parking on the street in front of the Ryman, 8:30 on a Friday night, driving straight. I did a video shoot in Charlotte that morning, drove through a rainstorm and got to Ryman at 8:30 and walked in there, and 20 minutes later, Les Paul's on stage. And then did photos with him the next day at the Country Music Hall of Fame, where his original prototype guitar is, the log. Wow. So I have all these pictures of him with the log.
Wow. And
again, at the time I'm going, wow, this is really cool. And I know I slept in my car between that, in the night in between. I think I drove back home after that. And because I largely did know people on the road, and I wasn't always willing to spend money on a hotel because I didn't have it. That's gas money. I need the gas money, and spent 2 days around him, and that was amazing. And again, it was like, only in retrospect do I go, I was in some amazing air for that length of time.
Sure, and it's you can't recreate that either.
No.
I mean, it's the instance. I mean, you may create it with someone else.
You can create something like it with something else, but it's it's all those factors, all this, this person, this place, that moment, surrounded by these people, by walls that are painted red, or larger space opposed to a smaller space. It's like all those things, and hopefully, as a photographer, you catch, or me, speaking as myself, hopefully I caught some of that in all of the work.
Well, I guess also by one of the missed facts I think we didn't touch on is you also get to hear a lot of really good music.
And sometimes I wish I had better memory of that. I've been, again, I look back and all the musicians or music that I fell in love with as a kid or discovered as I was becoming a photographer, I worked with.
Right. Yeah.
I always say all the bands that I was a fan of as a kid, and then as I got more into music in the '90s, I worked with them all.
Yeah, that's really
How did that happen? But out of that,
come true. I mean,
really is. It's a kind of and I rarely allow myself to say that, but yeah, not everybody gets to do that.
They don't.
And I recognize that more now at this stage. Doing like the show at the Scruggs Center and some of the other exhibits I've done is like, okay, not everybody has gotten to do what I did.
No.
So thank God I took a lot of pictures.
Just the experience alone, even if you didn't have the photographs, is amazing. But unlike other people, you have it documented.
Thank you, and thank you for saying that. It's and I'm hoping that other people down the road can say, "Oh, either he did that. I like to do that as well." I mentioned John Cohen earlier, and I was looking at some pictures last night I did of John several years ago, and the first time I met John was in 2003, same summer. Go figure.
That's a good summer.
And I told him that I was doing now what he was doing in the 60s, and that was a very idealistic way of saying that, but it was because John did so much more, but that was the intent. And he just looked at me and sighed and said, "Good luck, man." And there was more honesty in that statement than I think I've got from any other photographer. And hopefully somebody looks at my work down the road now or somewhere in the future and says, "Oh, well, that's a good idea. I should try that too."
Do you see people's other photographs of photographers you were with at certain places? I mean, do you see those sometimes?
Sometimes, not enough. And that's the thing. There was one other person taking pictures of the last show with Mr. Cash. I have never seen that photographer's work. I think I saw one picture online. It looked like it was early digital, and that may have all disintegrated. Thankfully, I shot on film. I kept all of it, and I've digitized it, and and how I got back in touch with John Carter Cash was about 7 years later or 8 years later. As almost completely a fluke, I went and saw Dale Jett, who was Sarah and AP's grandson. He was playing at Union Grove. I used to love the venue at Union Grove, the Cook Shack. God, that was so much fun. It was like a smaller version of the Carter Fold. It was so much fun.
I won a fiddle contest there.
Yeah. I mean, beautiful place. And I can even, again, it's funny how these things come back through photographs. I was supposed to be shooting something else that night in Charlotte. They told me the wrong night, so I went, "Oh, okay, well, I'll just go to Union Grove, an hour away, and here's Dale." And Dale goes, "Daniel, I haven't seen you in a while." "Oh, they're going to reopen John and June's old house over by the Fold next week," which also had been Maybelle Carter's house. "And come to it, John Carter will want you there." And of course, I had only spoken with John Carter once at that point, briefly, and I think it was like the year after his dad had passed away. So I think we talked, but it was like neither one of us really knew what to say to each other. And I came and showed up at the house, and John Carter was like, "Oh, I've been meaning to get in touch with you. Do you still have all those pictures?" Yes, and that has continued. The relationship has continued up to the present day. So again, it's not only taking the work, but also being able to hold on to the work and then trying to stay in touch with the artists or the musicians. If only because, I've given all my pictures to the various family members, Roseanne, and my philosophy is, this is your family. I know what Mr. Cash means to me. I know it means more to you. So all of them have my pictures, and if they use them for books or whatever, that's a bonus. The mere fact that I have that relationship with them and they recognized me and what I did in those moments, that fills many cups.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, who haven't you done that you would like to do?
Oh, good question. There's a couple that I would like to do. Van Morrison is one, but I know.
Van Morrison, yeah.
But it's also that, okay, do I want to see him now as opposed to, I'm a huge fan of Them, his first band.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine just worked on a Them box set and did a great job. And I would love to see, or Astro Weeks. I've been listening to Astro Weeks recently, like, oh my gosh, or St. Dominic's Preview, but that's one. Okay, that's one more. The one that did not work out, I'll tell you, the one that got away is Chuck Berry. He came to do a free show in Raleigh in 2008, and for whatever reason, it just didn't work out, and my wife did not want me to. She had a bad feeling about that day, and I kind of had a bad feeling too. But sometimes you're like, no, I don't. You're fighting it, and who knows? Maybe. And it was pouring down rain. It was like I probably would have walked away with no pictures at all.
Right.
But I've been very lucky in that just about everybody I wanted to see, I did see. Van Morrison's one. There's one or two, or they're more obscure artists. It's like me, but I've seen them in different configurations, or like definitely older like bands from the 60s. I may have seen them all separately, but I'd love to see them together. Maybe that will happen, maybe that won't. But there's a couple. I always say there has to be something that you haven't done yet that drives you, that says, okay, well, I haven't done that yet. Let's go do that. So there's a couple out there. So we'll see. We'll see. Yeah.
I look forward to seeing if you get them.
Thank you.
And then how about new people?
Oh, I have really enjoyed getting out and working with new bands. This is, in the last several years, I've worked with a lot of older artists, the names we mentioned, Monkees, Beach Boys, Procol Harum, Chad and Jeremy, Peter Asher. That's been a thrill and a half to work with them. But I've been doing some work with local bands or regional bands like Time Sawyer, Sinners and Saints. David. There's something about working with a band on the way up. That's completely different.
Where I was going
yes.
with that is that totally different than already established star?
It is, but in some ways it gives you more freedom, and that there are no rules. If I photograph the Avett Brothers now, it's completely different than me going to see them showing up at Sylvia in York and hanging out with them and taking pictures. It's because so much has changed around them, and they've changed, and I've changed over the 15, 20 years worth of time. But I always say I'm not really much on rules. Anytime you tell me no, it's like, whoa, okay, we'll see about that. I'm respectful of it, but I still think I can do something more.
Right.
So it kind of drives me to create something more out of it. I always say define the box and then find ways to break out of the box. But there's something about showing up and, hey, you're here, okay, let's. And sometimes you do quick photo shoots, you do all these things that you wouldn't be able to do with a larger act because they've got a time and they've got to get out, be on stage by 7:30 and this and that. And something about when people aren't thinking about it all as much and it's just happening, it's a lot more fun. It's a lot more freeing. So I really have enjoyed photographing a lot more newer artists, and it quite frankly, it's good because otherwise I'll listen to the same things, or I'll fall back on working with all the people that I've worked with over the years, and I need something else to drive me to create something new, something I wouldn't have planned on creating otherwise. Right. So that's one of the things I'm really trying to do more of right now is like, okay, who's out there, who's doing stuff, if I'm not working that night, let's go out and photograph them and let's see what happens.
Sure. I mean, that's kind of the same way with the podcast. I know a lot of people, but I've also met a lot of people that I didn't really know. Yeah. Which has been a really, joyful thing for me. And I'm sure it's the same thing. I mean,
it is.
I've met some really spectacular new young people. And
there's a lot of amazing, and that's been part of the joy of doing this show here at the Scruggs Center is like, for me, it all ties together. You've got the line from Earl and Doc and through to the Avetts and the Chocolate Drops and now Darren and Brooke and all these people, and if you're willing to go out there and find the music that's happening now, it's out there.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to dig with every... All right, Daniel, let me ask you this.
All right.
Is there any new bands out of Charlotte these days that anybody needs to see that you're taking pictures of?
Ooh, definitely Time Sawyer. They are hitting the road all over the region. I hope you check that out. I love Temperance League, just great straight up rock and roll. There's a lot of different artists. I do recommend the Tosco Music Party, which happens 4 or 5 times a year. I'm also one of the organizers behind Fab Fest, which is the Beatles tribute weekend that John does Father's Day weekend in June. Please come by and watch me talk, do interviews, everything. It's a blast. Go to the Evening Muse, go to Petra's, go to the Visual Light Neighborhood Theater, Greg McGraw's website, Max Music, with 2 X's, maxmusic.com. There's a lot of great musicians. I just did I photographed a show at Petra's last week. It was a tribute to a band called the Magnetic Fields. Did a record 20 years ago called 69 Love Songs. I shot that tour in Athens, Georgia in January 2000, and it was a whole group of musicians that I had not seen live, and they all performed songs from that triple album, and I loved it, and it made me want to go and see what they all were doing individually. So go out there. There's tons of great. It's still amazing, and it's been fun actually coming up here to Shelby and see who's playing the breweries around here. There's Art of Sound coming later. There's the Earl Scruggs Music Festival.
Yes, and that I guess you'll be taking photographs there.
I hope so. I'm definitely going to be putting into. Depending on, again, we'll see which media outlet I'm working with, or which one I use at that point. If I need something more than just, I'm Daniel Coston, which still sounds hilarious and funny to say that, but it's nice when it works.
Yeah.
There's a lot out there, so I'm enjoying as much as anybody seeing that, and then continuing to work with the bands I've worked with over the years.
Well, I appreciate you coming and doing this. You're one of the true artists that I've had here. You do your work with passion. I look forward to seeing more of it.
Thank you.
What's
Thank
coming
you.
in the future.
Thank you.
And let's run your website again.
Yes, danielcoston.com. That is kind of the everyday place to see a lot of the music and other things and writings. There's a lot of my interviews are archived there as well. There's Facebook is just me, Daniel Coston. My photo is always my late cat, because he was way cuter than I am. Daniel Coston photos on Instagram, Daniel Coston on Twitter, which I don't use often enough, but I'll try to do more of that. You can also link to, I have various other sites for my event photography, like danielcoston.photoreflect.com, but you can link to all that through danielcoston.com, and it's all out there. Come by and check it out.
You shoot local bands if they come to you.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. I love, and again, I didn't plan on shooting this band. Let's go do it. Okay. So whether it's local, national, international, if the music's good, let's go.
That sounds good. Again, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.